Hi, I'm Luke from Wex Photo Video, and today we're in Istanbul. I have with me the new Sony camera, the ZV-E1. We're going to be going around Istanbul, testing it out, seeing how good it is for content creation, so come and join us. So it's the world's lightest interchangeable lens camera, weighing only 483 grams. It's 4K full frame. It's the same sensor as the A7S III, and it has some really cool new features that we're going to show you over the next few days that are really good for content creation. Let's go. So we just found this unbelievably beautiful market. We saw it, we knew we had to come in, and something very funny happened. So George tried to set up his gimbal and we were told immediately, no, you can't do that. Just a little bit of extra gear and it's just a bit too much. But what's amazing about this is that the dynamic active track, which is new to this camera that the A7S III doesn't actually have, enables you to get shots that feel like you're on a gimbal, but this is the setup, which is amazing. So as a vlogger, as a content creator, you can come to somewhere like this and get away with getting a gimbal look and not be told off for it, which is, I think, is really cool. I just had some eucalyptus tea. Apparently I'm going to live forever. I'm happy with that. That's good. I'm glad I came to Turkey. I don't know what to do with this tea now. You just sort of you get given these little teas and they're too hot to drink. They're amazing, but they're way too hot to drink, and then you just sort of have to down it. Oh, it's good though. It's really good. So we've just come to the Yemi Cami Mosque. We've seen a bunch of beautiful mosques around the city, and it's a big part of Istanbul's culture, so we really wanted to check one out. But unfortunately, the Hagia Sophia the line was like an hour long, and we thought better to come to the Yemi Cami instead. So we're going to head in there and have a look inside, but before we do, let's talk about the specs of this camera. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the same sensor as the A7S III, the Exmor R-CMOS sensor, which for a vlogging camera is amazing. But that's not the only thing that it borrows from the A7S III. It's got a lot of similar codecs. So it shoots up to 30 frames per second with 4K. It shoots up to 60 frames per second with no crop in 4K. And it shoots up to 120 frames per second with only a 10% crop in 4K, which is amazing. Also, you can plug this camera into your PC and live stream in 30 frames per second in 4K, which is a really revolutionary feature for content creators. So we are currently heading to the Grand Bazaar, which is probably one of the most famous markets in the world. So we're very excited. We're going to test out a few things, some of the cool features, the new features that are specific for content creation. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think we might have found the Grand Bazaar. It might not be though. So here we are at the Grand Bazaar, very exciting, and when you're filming in a place like this, it's very busy, jostly, bumping into people, very difficult to film. So in an environment like this, it's going to be imperative that you get stable shots, and that's going to be really difficult. So Sony users will be quite accustomed to in-body image stabilization being quite good. Active mode is something that's been on the A7S III. This camera offers dynamic active mode. This is assessing the image and basically using a digital crop and keeping it steady in the middle. And we'll show you how that looks.
Hey guys, I'm George. I've been helping Luke out with this review. We've been playing around with the camera together, and I just thought I'd come on camera to explain this setting for you because it's something I've been playing around with. So it's called auto framing, which sounds terrible. It sounds like it's going to put some of us out of a job, but I don't think it will, although it is really good because basically what it does is it tracks somebody's face or whatever you might want to be keeping in the frame, and then basically puts like a digital crop on, which will then move the frame around. You can actually see on the back of the screen, if you see the white box that's being captured, that's what's actually being recorded. Anything outside of the white box is not actually being recorded. It'd be really good for a YouTuber or somebody like that who's going to be shooting themselves, because if I was going to shoot myself, I can pop it on a tripod, and rather than it being like a really boring static, it actually means that it's going to be moving around, it's going to be zooming in and out, panning, and it kind of just creates a slightly more dynamic look. Okay, so right now it's sort of like taking up the whole of the screen, but then if I move it so that I'm sort of bordering on the edges, then that's when it really starts to come into play. So even if I spin, yeah, it's doing a really good job. And if I start to sort of walk, I'm gonna make it really difficult for Luke, who's trying to film me because there's loads of people in here. And if I just start to walk and move around and jog myself around a bit, it's doing a really nice job of keeping me center frame, which is exactly what we're looking for. Hey guys, it's day 2 in Istanbul, and I'm just going to jump in just to talk to you a little bit about the resolutions and frame rates. We touched on them before, but there's a little bit more that I want to go into detail on. So we've got 4K 30p if you just want some regular real-time footage. You've then got 4K 60p. This doesn't have a crop, which is really, really beneficial. It means that if you're shooting on a 35, it's going to look like a 35. Not all cameras can do this. Sometimes when you jump into the slow-mo modes, there is a bit of a crop, and it can be a little bit awkward because it kind of changes the depth of your lenses. I'm not really a fan of that. I'd much rather my lens do exactly what they say on the tin, so I'm really happy that I can shoot at 4K 60 without any of those issues. And then of course we've got 4K 120 with a 10% crop. For something like 120p, I'm perfectly happy with a 10% crop. 10% is very little. Now, if you want to go the other way around and you want to shoot time lapses, this camera can actually shoot time lapses within the camera. So you can set it up using the S and Q menu. That stands for slow and quick if anybody doesn't know. I always have a play around with the time lapse feature just because I think it's fun. I think it's really cool to get something so different, and it's nice that you can do it in body and it can output that file instantaneously within a time lapse. It also shoots at quite high bit rates. So it means that there's going to be a huge amount of data within your file, which again is just going to give you that really top of the range image quality. There is one slight issue with this for me, and that's the fact that obviously when you're editing some of these large bitrate files, they can be really difficult to edit with. They can be really slow and sort of clunky. That means you're going to need a fast system. If you don't have a fast system to edit on, that means that you're probably going to have to proxy your files, which is just another thing that you have to add to your workflow. It's not the end of the world, but it's something taking into consideration, especially when you've got fast turnarounds. You can also shoot in all intra as well as long GOP, which is really nice because all intra just provides such a high quality look. And again, it sort of attributes to the stuff I've been saying about how much data there is within the footage. It gives you more control and it gives you more image quality, and who's ever going to complain about that? You can also film all of these modes in 10-bit 422, which means you're going to get a huge range of color depth. This is great for any graders out there, anybody that wants to play around with their footage, or anybody that maybe is partial to setting their white balance a little bit wrong on set, because you're just going to get so much flexibility. It means that it's going to basically perform very similarly to some of the other Sony cameras, which we already know if you've ever graded their footage, you get a lot of control there. So that's really nice. I'm going to hand over to Luke now because he's going to tell you a little bit more about the colors and how you can control that within the camera.
So this camera has 15 plus stops of dynamic range, which is really good for situations where you've got all kinds of different lighting coming in. We just had a shot actually where that came in really handy. Silhouetted, harsh lighting coming in, and being able to bring up those shadows in post with that amount of dynamic range is an immense, immense help. So you get all the picture profiles that you would expect from Sony, S-Log 3, S-Cine. We actually tried out S-Cine last night in a low light conditions, and there's a lot of flexibility there. Reduced noise, you know, you can push it really far, and it was really great, and there wasn't much light around. One of the benefits of S-Cine is for people that don't have the time, they're on the go, the content creators, and they just want a good image very quickly, is you can use that, and it's a great image. You don't need to color correct, you don't need to color grade, and it'll work for you. So one of the great features that, again, is for content creation and making things happen faster for you, is if you head into log shooting settings, you can embed the LUT into the image, so you do not need to color grade in post. It's there for you, and it looks amazing, and it's just going to make everything much smoother. But there's really two options. You can embed the LUT so that it's there within the image when you get it back onto your computer, or you can choose not to. So you can see it on the camera while you're shooting, so you can expose correctly, but it doesn't have to be embedded into the actual image. So that's a really good option to have. So we've just come to Kadakoi, which is an amazing street food area, and we're gonna have a bit of fun, eat some food, check out the AF Assist, which is a very new and interesting feature. Basically what it allows you to do is to have two people in the frame, and apparently the lens will change its aperture to accommodate for you. So if there was one person in frame and it's a shallow depth of field, and then another person maybe came in behind, it will adjust the depth of field with the aperture and then change it again once they leave. I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely starving, so let's go get some food. So I kind of just want to demonstrate today like how cinematic this camera can be, because we were shooting mostly on zooms on the first day, and I was sort of feeling like, yeah, it's fantastic for vlogging and for content creators, but actually this camera is not a million miles away from the A7S III. You can get some beautiful, beautiful cinematic shots with the right lenses. So we're going to try the primes today and get on the 51.2 and see how that looks. And I'm going to show you how good this can look. So one of the features for content creators is the 9:16 crop. So you can output in both landscape and portrait. It just saves you having to do that in post. And one of the great things about it is that if you want to shoot in the middle of the frame and get a 9:16, you can see either side of that frame. So you know if something's going to come in and ruin the shot, which is a really great feature. So this is a good demonstration of what we're talking about. So we got Tiffany center frame, and then people walking by, and so we can see when someone's about to, you know, come in and block the shot, which you can imagine is quite a handy tool.
So this camera actually has a feature that's been borrowed from the FX30, and it's called focus breathing compensation. Now, if you don't know what focus breathing is, I'll just explain it for you quickly. It's basically when you do a focus pull, sometimes it will slightly change the perspective of the lens, and it will have what appears to be like a slight crop or a slight sort of pull out. Now this camera has something that is built in, which will basically, as it says, compensate for that. And if you're especially particular and you really like to have your lenses do exactly what they're telling, this feature should do a really good job. You can have a look here and see what you think yourself. So we just come back from our second day of shooting. It's actually our final day of shooting this review in Istanbul, and we just wanted to summarize the ZV-E1 for you guys. Some of the things we thought, but before we do that, there's a couple of things we actually haven't mentioned yet, and they're all to do with the body. So I'll start us off, I'll tell you that this body is actually the first one that's made of completely recyclable materials, which as an eco-warriors like myself and Luke, we really love that. It also, as well as the fact we mentioned it's really light, it's really tiny body, which is really cool. One of those things that makes it so tiny is the fact that it lacks an EVF. So anybody that's hoping to take photos on this camera, that is going to be a little bit difficult, although it's got a 12 megapixel sensor, so it's not always going to be the best for photos, but it certainly can do them. Even though they don't have an EVF, they've still got some nice stuff on the top of the camera, and that is because it has a multi-interface shoe. That means that you can actually plug in stuff and it has an electronic connection. So if you're somebody that wants to get really good audio quality, you want to use XLR ports and stuff like that, you can plug in their XLR adapter without any issues. One of the other things we wanted to tell you about the body of this camera is that it uses the same battery as the A7S III and the FX3. This is amazing because if you wanted to use this camera as a B cam, or if you already own either camera, it's going to work really well. Also, these batteries are really long lasting, so it means that you can go out and do long shoot days. Now, Luke, you've been mostly using this camera. How many batteries have you been using?
Indeed. I don't think I've been through more than 2 in an entire day, and we've been shooting from 9 AM until, I mean, yesterday we shot until about 10 PM. So two batteries the whole day, which is kind of amazing. The articulating screen that it has makes it very easy to be able to capture things and not be pointing it right in people's faces.
It also means if you're like Luke and you're extremely vain and you want to film yourself all the time, you can see it as you do it. In terms of ports, you've got your regular aux port, which you can use to record into. You've got your 3.5mm headphone jack, which you can use to monitor that audio. The only port that I'm not super crazy about is the fact that it has a micro HDMI and it's not a full-size HDMI. Now, of course, that's still going to be compatible with a huge amount of external recorders, external screens, stuff like that. But I do always prefer it when there is a full-size HDMI, but this isn't really a full-size camera. It's really tiny, so you're going to expect there's going to be some kind of compromise there. But that's enough about the body. We want to tell you what we thought after using this camera for a couple of days. So what has really sort of struck out to you, Luke, as something that's really impressed you?
For me, with this camera, it's all about the versatility of it. It's the fact that it's a bit of both, of being cinematic and being able to get amazing shots, you know, with the right lenses. But also it offers all these new features that make post-production much quicker.
I completely agree. I think it's, when I got approached about this, I was actually thought, I'm not sure about this camera because the price point I thought seemed a little high initially. But actually, I've been really impressed because actually it offers so many of the features of which the more expensive Sony cameras also offer. You know, it's really not that far off something like an A7S or an FX3. Sony told us, oh, it could be used as a B camera for something like the A7S III, the FX3. Again, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, I'm not sure if this is gonna be of the level that's required to be considered a B cam to these cameras, but I've been totally proved wrong. Once we put some nice lenses on it and we got some really cinematic footage, I've been really impressed, and it's actually something that I would consider using as a B cam to one of their more mainline cameras.
And I think it says a lot that this camera is using the same sensor as the S3 and the FX6, because this is a camera that has got a lower price point. It's for a different kind of audience, and it's still living up to that incredible image quality. That's my favorite part about it, really.
We've had an incredible time shooting with this camera in Istanbul. I'm really sad that actually this trip is over. I'm really sad not only because the trip's over, but because I'd really love to take this camera home with me, but I have a feeling Sony are not going to be okay with that. But before we do, we just want to give you our rating that we've been giving in the video so you can see it on screen now. This is what we think about the camera. Please let us know what you think. How you think the camera's performed, how you think the footage looks, and of course, if you have any questions for us about our experiences or anything that we haven't maybe gone into enough detail on, we'd be more than happy to answer your questions in the comments, so leave them down below.
So hit subscribe. Thank you for joining us. I've been Luke from Wex Photo Video, and we will see you next time.